Marika, queen, consort, mother, and by some reckoning, an author of a crime. The Elden Ring's story is full of ambiguity.
Let me process this.
But there's one interpretation that keeps nagging at people who read the original language lines and the DLC closely. That Marika did not merely become a goddess by fate or accident. She negotiated, she used, and she betrayed the spiritual people who raised her, the shamans. To claim the throne. And wow, you know what time it is? The most treacherous character in the game. She cheated on everyone. She cheated on every one of her sons, daughters, husband. She banished morgott and mohg to the sewers. Who would do such a thing? Who? And then she went on giving birth to other children she didn't care. With herself. I mean, I'd be fucking myself too if I looked like that. Today we are going to talk about the culture she left behind, the ritual power she commanded, the bargain she struck, and the consequences that followed. The choice of the Japanese term Miko is deliberate and telling. It carries both the shrine-priestess connotation, the Miko who dances the kagura and becomes a vessel for kami, and the Itako tradition, blind, itinerant mediums who summon and converse with spirits. Miyazaki's word acts as a hinge. These shamans are simultaneously priestesses and necromancers. They exist outside shrines and within small communities. They are both ritual assistants and primary channels for spirits. The DLC assets, the Shamanic village, the Ancestor Mother fuse to a tree trunk, the Entrail, the two-fed vibe, all point to a people whose life is a continuous, practical negotiation with a spirit and flesh. The world they inhabit is shot through with grace, the Elden Ring's golden life energy, which means nature itself is saturated and communicative. For beings with harmonizing human flesh, living outdoors takes on a functional meaning. Their bodies attuned to grace, to spirits in leaves and water, to the crucible's aftertaste in soil and ruin. The meaning of this concept explains the physical oddities we find: women braided into vegetation, flowers sprouting from bodies, and literal blurring of organism and environment. The harmonizing biology is not mere atmosphere. The two-fed vibe description and the Entrails material both state that shamans adapt well to other meat, that their flesh blends and binds. We see the result across side of the earth tree. Shamans used as living glue for vessel making. Central bodies still visible under a swollen mess of other flesh. Faces of victims embedded and screaming in that mass. The shamans are both container and conservator of runes. Their bodies prevent the runes from scattering, allowing condensed grace, visually hinted as a golden filament in item icons, to accumulate and be used. Small dialogues sow big seeds. Hook, the blacksmith's remark about meeting a spirit, attunement expert, and owing them a favor are easily glazed over. In his voice lines, he asks for a weapon that can kill a god and speaks of an oath to Queen Marika. When Enya calls Marika the guest of the Elden Ring, barrier of its vision, the textual similarities become apparent. Marika's body is receptacle. Marika learned or already possessed the capacity to host other prisons. Hook's chain and oath then are not only personal drama, they are evidence of Marika's practical agency in the human world. She did favors, she contracted smiths, and she engaged with craftsfolk in a way that ties shamanic power to artifact production. If Hook's unnamed attunement expert was Marika, the application is that the queen's shamanic training was not merely ritual, it moved into technology, into the forging of implements meant to pierce divinity. Marika's capacity to host the ancestral beast is both spiritual and procedural. It is the interplay of body, ritual, and tool. Dominuna preserves the ritual in concentrated and grotesque form. The celebration is superficially reminiscent of May Day, garlands, a decorated pole, and a maiden of the year. The blue celebrant hood reserved for those who led the rites. Yet the male villages festival, described in festive Greece text and visual icons, is couched in flaying, cannibalism, and blood rites. Festive Grease, when applied to a weapon, grants runeless absorption per hit, the same functional motif found in the celebrant's weapons. Its icon is flower petal and fragments of bone, and the item description says the loving festival is an ancient custom tacitly permitted by the Golden Tree. That last clause is the crux. Marika, guardian of the Golden Order, who abolishes contrary cults with brutal efficiency, allowed this practice. Why? Either Marika's tolerance is inexplicable favoritism or it is personal. The pattern of ritual aesthetics between Dominula and the shamanic village, the all-female society, the garlands, the wooden cottages, argues for cultural continuity. If the male village inherited and exaggerated a pre-existing shamanic rite, Marika's permissiveness is explained as familial concession. The loving feast is not an alien costume to be suppressed, but a local liturgy she grew from. The festival macabre components have a specific function. Men are primarily the victims, for reasons both symbolic and pragmatic. Or maybe feminism, who knows. Symbolically, men can stand for seed, creation, the principle of masculine creative force, and pragmatically, itinerant males are often warriors and therefore repositories of combat runic grace. A dead knight's corpse is a high-yield rune source. The shaman's use of such bodies, flaying, rendering fat, crafting implements from bone, is ritual economy. Blood and runes are converted into fertilizers, grease and ritual tools that literally fertilize the ground and shape the life cycle they worship. This is the logic the DLC gives us. Runes do not scatter if placed within a vessel. The shaman's flesh binds matter. The ritual uses that preserved grace to spore renewal. Dominula's meadows bloom because the soil was fed, literally and symbolically, by rune-infused bodies. The presence of a snake skin near Bonny Village and the curved sword of the serpent god carry a particular resonance. Gelmir, serpent cult, practices echo in Dominol's rites. Some weapons tied to Gelmir restore HP on kill. Dominol's women absorb runes instead, yet both systems share an economy of life taken and life returned. The serpent is a perfect shamanic symbol. It never dies. It sheds skin, it renews, filleting echoes shading. For shamans who idolize the psychological renewal of death, the serpent is theological, mirror, and ritual justification. Bonnie also shows a trunked headless shaman, another Ancestor Mother, outside a helmet later controlled by horned man. If Ballarat left this figure intact, it suggests the headless woman predated the herald's occupation, a further sign the shamanic culture reached widely and deeply into the region's pre-horn social fabric. The finger logic is where ritual and statehood converge. The two finger transmits a language of light, incorporeal characters that can be written, formed, and weaponized. Finger maidens explicitly invoke the Miko terminology, linking the Miko of the shamanic village to the Miko of the fingers. Melina's lines crystallize the functional crossover. You know who are the virgins of the fingers? They serve the two fingers. They guide and help the fated. I could replace her. I could change the runes into your power. The fingers teach syntax, how to shape runes into blades, into talismans, and eventually into governance. The seed talisman's description suggests the finger's presence at the golden tree's genesis. When you place these facts side by side, shamans who know how to bind runes in flesh, fingers who shape runes into speech and artifacts, the generative engine for the divine gate appears. Biological receptacle plus runic grammar plus a polity with the resources to operationalize both. Belorat's Horn Heralds are obsessed with the spiral and the crucible. They design tower, ascetic rituals, and build inner alium to approach divinity by technical means. Churches attributed to Mesmer inside Shadowlands, the Great Sword of Damnation's golden light, and the rune bow-like candle of Belorat Inquisitors show a shared material dialect between Leyndell and Belorat. It is unlikely that these artifacts arose independently. Rather, they are the products of exchange. So maybe the logical conclusion will be Marika, an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, was the bridge the Heralds needed. The Horn Heralds possess territory, soldiers, prisons, and the ability to provide bodies in bulk. The Shamans possessed a biology that could bind and preserve runes. The Fingers provided the codified method to use those runes. Marika brought personhood, charisma, and the sacerdotal claim to be a vassal. From the Herald's perspective, a hornless shaman would normally be suspect, but as an Empyrean, Marika had an authority that pressed the tower's leadership into conciliation. The gate required more than horns, it needed a living, respective host who could absorb the ancestral beast. They could build the gate of bodies, but without harmonizing flesh, it would rot. Together, alliance failed necessity. Now watch the story trailer carefully. The divine gate in that cut is fresh, red and pulsing, not petrified. Marika stands before it, scooping runes from the living mess into a heap she cradles. Runes ascend from the bodies as luminous filaments and converge into her handful. An animal roar answering across the portal, identical to the ancient beast's cry, punctuates the ritual. The image is literal, the gate is a built mechanism for rune concentration, a literal ladder of bodies whose golden filaments are gathered and used to fashion a receptacle. If we examine the Entrails icon and its filament, we find evidence of condensed grace. The shaman's harmonizing flesh prevents the runes from dissipating upon death. The Horn Heralds constructed the gate. They supplied the logistics and bodies. The shaman's flesh kept the mess coherent. The Fingers gave the conceptual technology to extract and channel runes. Marika applied all three to herself, fashioning her own rune, embedding it into the Elden ring, and thereby founding the Golden Order. This is not merely allegory, it is a techno-ritual synthesis. The gate is both artifice and sacrament. It is the mechanical realization of a theology that turns death into state resource. A cruel implication follows from the details. The shaman used in the gate were not simply killed and forgotten. Some remain alive in the gate. They survive, consumed and bound, their bodies keeping rune power available. That means the gate is not merely an historical atrocity, it is ongoing. Its animated portions make possible later ascensions. Miko, for instance, uses the gate's residual life for his own ends. A macabre perpetuity follows. The gate preserves the very inputs that let other Empyreans ascend. The Bunny Village Ghost's lines says, "Come on, be obedient and enter the vessel and become a righteous person, for you are shamans, and therefore you were born for this." These lines present the violence as destiny, a culture's own language turned into instruction for its destruction. Fan narratives, or maybe some may be true, but sometimes romanticize Marika as a revenger or avenger. But the timeline and the material evidence complicate that reading. Marika had ascended before Mesmer's later crusade against the Horn Heralds. She had an army, a mother tree, and an order, and yet the shaman's persecution continued. We saw churches attributed to Mesmer existed before the crusade. Great swords of damnation and candles that look like rune bows speak to shared material culture. If Marika intended immediate revenge, she had the means long before Mesmer's violence. Instead, an alliance of convenience seems to have been struck. The Herald's desire for an Empyrean and Marika's desire for runes for ascendancy. Marika returns once to her home village centuries after. The Golden Braid's description speaks of a prayer, wish, and confession before the Ancestor Mother. She cuts a braid and leaves it as an offering. Then she never returns. That braid is a symbol of both contrition and the possibility of restitution. The golden braid item emphasizes the devotional act, yet also admits none know what Marika's prayer or confession consisted of. The implication is horrific. She knew, she acted, and she sought absolution that cannot undo the deed. If we suggest Marika was coerced by the heralds, the counter-evidence is strong. She had a body of power, Maliketh at her side, the finger's approval, and enough standing to have warned or to have protected her people. Her failure to do so suggests determinism of ambition. Seduced by the possibility of godhood, she made the trade. She used her own culture, the people who raised her, their bodies and rights as the material means to ascend. But you have to understand one thing, even though these things are kinda translucent and there are a lot of evidence that actually supports whatever I actually yap about in this video, I cannot be 100% sure because we are seeing everything in our perspective and others' perspective and the world's perspective, not Marika's. The problem with Marika is we never actually understand what she felt, but still, the things that she did in this game just makes her hard to understand or to support. Leda once said that Lord Mikola said that it all began with temptation and betrayal. Thus was born gold, thus was born the shadow. Gold and shadow are coextensive. The mother tree's grace is real, but everything that made it real is anchored in bodies and choices. Marika's ascent is not an accident or a simple heroic arc. It is a classified compromise between ritual knowledge, political expediency, and personal ambition. The shaman's world, lush, horrific, rhythmically cyclic, is at once source and sacrifice. So now that we talked about the DLC, let's move on and talk about the real game. What Marika did after all of these rituals and seduction or betrayals. Well, buckle up because it's not going to get better. Maybe you're going to hate her even more now. Start in the mountain tops. The fire giants were not simply defeated. The aftermath reads like extermination. The remembrance of the fire giant records the queen's stamped verdict. O trifling giant, mayest thou tend thy flame for eternity. That line reveals a pattern. Marika didn't merely win, she punished survivors with eternal servitude. A punitive enchantment rather than mercy. That's a ruler weaponizing divinity to degrade whole people. And then the trolls. Sword mountains and the lord indicate the trolls, descendant from giants, turned against their kin to side with the earth tree. That betrayal didn't buy them dignity. The war against the giants entry explains the result. Many trolls were integrated as war beasts, with stakes lodged in their open chests to drag carriages. In short, they were enslaved and made into disposable tools or meats. Marika convinced these poor people to betray their own kin and then chains them for that same betrayal. That's political cruelty. But if you want to defend Marika in this matter, giants are not human and therefore do not possess human rights. Checkmate, I guess. But if you want a proof of Marika's personal betrayals, watch Maliketh. The remembrance of the Black Blade says Marika's sole need of her shadow was a vessel to lock away distant death. Even then, she betrayed him. When Maliketh collapses, he cries out in anguish and asks why Marika would ghoul him, an archaic word meaning to betray or cheat. In short, Maliketh explicitly knows Marika betrayed him. Maliketh's life had a singular role: be the vessel to lock away destined death. She made him the keeper and then betrayed him anyway. Godwyn the Golden's death is the pivot of the Shattering, the first demigod to die and the first seed of death in the lands between. The assassins are the Black Knife group, daggers bound to the rune of death. There are strong ties between the Black Knives and the Gnomon, and the Gnomon are repeatedly described as being of the same stock as Marika. That's kinda sussy, you know? People connected to Marika were the instruments that killed Godwyn. Now, the speculation that Marika orchestrated Godwyn's death to catalyze the Shattering, we can't prove it outright. But you have to understand this. Godwyn was the golden boy of the Golden Order. Even his character was basically resembling the order that Marika and the Greater Well actually made. And he was a die-hard fan of this order, so we also know that Marika after some time hated this order and this Greater Well. So this is maybe one of the reasons why she killed her own son. But still, Godwyn was a good guy among the people. He was basically the Rhaegar Targaryen of the Elden Ring, Shabriri and the Great Caravan. These merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground of the capital of lands between Leyndell. Who pushed for the burial? Shabriri, a figure tied to frenzied flame law. His talisman text notes he had his eyes gouged out for slender and later hosted the blight of the frenzied flame in his empty sockets. Marika trusted Shabriri's slander and allowed the Great Caravan to be buried under the capital, accused of bringing the frenzied flame. The caravan was buried alive. Later, the frenzied flame erupted anyway. The state used accusation to justify murder. When the evidence of slander emerged, Shabriri blinded for it. Marika did not unearth them or reverse the sentence. She let them rot. The caravan's tragedy ripples. It helps spawn the frenzied flame's presence in the world. Also, Marika and the Golden Order committed mutilation of newborn omen, which resulted in death 90% of the times, imprisoned them in the sewers, and even created the Omen Killer Army, which is literally the SS but even worse. Also, genocide and enslavement of misbegotten and mass genocide of Albinarics. She is really, I don't know, I'm really trying to make her... Rennala's story is heartbreak framed as collateral. She married Radagon after he repented for invading her lands. They had a life together and he fathered children. Then Marika stepped in. Marika sent her first consort Godfrey away and demanded Radagon return and marry her, even though Radagon had been married to Rennala. The result? Rennala's personal life was wrecked. Raya Lucaria fell into disarray and a woman of great power became a tragic figure broken by Marika's will. Marika then gave birth to Melania, a child whose fate became another tool in the Golden Order's cruelty. Marika rearranged the families and lives like chess pieces, consolidating her power at the cost of others' families. And at the end, us. We're going to talk about us, what she did to the Tarnished. Gaiden concluded the Queen wished for the Tarnished to struggle eternally. Marika's plan, as Gaiden describes, was not to uplift but to perpetuate struggle. The entire Tarnished return narrative becomes in this interpretation a grotesque spectacle. She wanted endless striving, suffering, and ritualized endurance, at least what Gaiden thinks and what Gaiden says about Marika's plan or wish. The Tarnished become sacrifices to a cosmic cruelty dressed as destiny. So is Marika pure evil? If you define evil as repeated choices that intentionally harm and discard living beings for ideological ends or godhood, the evidence stacks heavily. Genocides and enslavements, betrayal of loyal servants, betrayal of your own people, killing thousands, and likely orchestration of Godwyn's death and burying a caravan alive and letting their curse leak into the world, dismantling families for dynastic gain. The moral tally is damning. But still, later on, she realized she wasn't and was the biggest puppet of that fake god, turned her back on that god and destroyed destroyed the Elden Ring, created Melina to burn the Earth Tree and to make us more powerful, I guess, then literally got crucified for trying to make a fail-safe and beat the outer god. She is really a complete, complex character. Is she a good person? I definitely doubt that. That's a big question, but I don't think it's simple as that. Some stuff I kinda loves morally grey storytelling, but nuance doesn't erase atrocities. Marika wrapped brutality in pity, claimed cosmic necessity, and then weaponized the faith. That make her a particularly dangerous kind of evil. In terms of whatever we know of her in the game and the item descriptions, whatever the characters in the game talk about her, she's definitely a pure devil. Even Mesmer at the end curses her, which is kind of crazy because I thought he actually loves her, but yeah, disappointed. But what do you think? Do you think that I yap a lot in this one? Do you agree with me, or are you a pro-Marika defender? If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and until next time, may the flames guide you away.